they can come. What's happening here? I can't. Let's see what happened if okay, there they go. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes, everyone. We are still missing one of our panelists. We'll probably start without her if she isn't here on time, because we can all catch up. But we will start in just a few minutes. It's not quite the top of the hour. Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Hey, Jane.
Hey.
Yeah, okay. Now, what is the world is going on with my... So we'll just get started in a couple of minutes here.
Do we know how many people? Or do
Yeah, we don't have very many people yet. We only have
okay.
about 8. I don't know why we have so few. We usually have about 60 or 70.
Oh, wow.
This notice didn't go out quite as well as I was telling Mark that we had a little bit of snafu getting the notice out for this. Uh, some people had trouble reading the newsletter. That was not good. But it was in the speaker's notice, the calendar, and then we also sent out a notice this week. So hopefully everybody will come.
Yeah.
But we are... So that's good. My PC keeps kind of locking up here. I don't know why that's happening. Come on, stop it. Uh-oh, I do have a problem.
Uh-oh.
Well, we'll probably be okay. We always are. But right now it's not
But you're
talking
good at
anymore.
technology.
Well, it's not, yeah, but see, I think we all get into those places where technology gets the better of us, and it has just stopped talking entirely. So I'm having a little trouble here with why is this? Just a moment. We can start in just a second, but I don't know why I'm having problems. Let's see if I can figure that out.
Give me 1 second. Just want to grab something. Hold on.
Yeah, why is this not? No, something has locked me up. One moment while I try to fix it.
I have that happen a lot when I'm using Outlook.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm not using Outlook.
Oh.
But I am a little stuck here. Why is that? Okay, let's try to. All right. What we will do is we will fake it. We will do the best we can. So let's go ahead and get started. And hopefully by the time we get to the Q&A, my stuff will be working better than it is right now. But anyway, I'm Deb Cook-Lewis. I am on the GDB Alumni Association board. With Jane Flower. And so Okay, good. I think my PC is about to work. Yeah, getting a little distracted by it. Jane Flower, who's from our outreach program, and we're going to be talking today about travel to conventions and big events with and without your dog. And this year I'll be going without my dog because she is pretty much retired. And so she's working here, but she's not willing to go. Oh, she'd love to go, but she doesn't want to travel the 12 hours to get there. So anyway, so we're going to be talking a little bit about that today and taking your questions and comments. So I will tell you just quickly that I'm on my sixth dog. She is a yellow lab named Praline, and I travel extensively to conventions and events. When I worked for the University of Washington, I traveled all over the country doing training and presentations. And now I travel in my role as president of the American Council of the Blind, and I have to go to a lot of events for the ACB. And my dogs have all spent a lot of time in hotels and on travel, and everything you should and should not do, I have ever done. So, Mark, how about, would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit about that?
Sure. Thanks, Deb. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Mark Gillard, and I am the Director of Orientation and Mobility Services at Guide Dogs for the Blind. I'm based at our California campus. My background is I'm a guide dog mobility instructor and a certified O&M specialist, and I've been in the field for over 30 years now, both in the United States and Australia, where my accent is from, in case people are wondering. So I am. I've had various roles over the years at GDB, including field service manager for the San Francisco Bay Area, and in that capacity, I got to know a lot of graduates, of course, and certainly attended a lot of conferences and conventions, both as a delegate and presenter, and as a field manager assisting our graduate team. So I'm happy to be presenting on this today.
All right, great, thank you. And Jane, how about introducing yourself?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
I think they can.
Okay, wonderful. I was just making sure it's unmuted. Hi, everyone. This is Jane Flower, and I'm the Youth Outreach Specialist here at Guide Dogs for the Blind. And I've been at Guide Dogs going on 12 years now, and currently working my third guide dog, Pilaf, who's 9 years old. And in my role, I definitely travel a lot to a lot of conferences and conventions, not only mostly working, but as a participant as well. And I've been to conferences with a lot of functional vision and usable vision, and now attending conferences with not a lot of usable vision remaining, and dogs at younger ages and dogs at older ages. So I've had a lot of experience in all of those things. I'm happy to be here to share some of my experience and to help all of you.
Oh, great. All right. So let's start out then a little bit by talking about what happens, how we prep up to get ready to go to one of these events, and what we might do special to get ready to do this as we're traveling as a blind person and as we're probably traveling also with a dog. So Jane, what kind of things, what do you think we ought to be doing before we
Oh,
ever go out the door?
there's so many things.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to break this down into two different things. Some things you can do to prepare yourself, obviously, from just registering for the conference and traveling there and those types of things. And then you can do to best prepare your dog for this type of activity and trip as well. So definitely I want to say preparation is key. Conferences and conventions, especially if you're traveling this summer to ACB or NFB National, these can be very challenging environments. Large hotels, lots of people, lots of guide dogs, lots of canes, and they're noisy environments. They can be challenging as a person who is visually impaired or blind to travel in these types of environments. So I'm just going to start talking about just registering, just some quick tips and tricks about registering for conferences. You want to register in advance for conferences, well in advance, because sometimes you're going to get some good early bird rates. So think about that in your travel plans. If you can as soon as possible, the better. And carefully review the conference information. Sometimes there's pre-conference events. There's a lot of different offerings that go on at conferences, a lot of cool excursions. And then also looking at your budget too, because a lot of the stuff's really fun, but it does cost money. So some things to think about. Take note of any accessibility um, uh, things that are offered by the conference organizers. If they have the programs in an accessible format, whether it's like electronic or braille, large print, do they offer any hotel orientation upon arrival to the conference? And create a schedule for yourself once you've registered and you're going to go to different sessions. Create an accessible and easy to access schedule for yourself. So when you're moving around, you can easily access your schedule and the things that you want to participate in at the conference. Thinking about the hotel and booking your hotel. Again, you want to book early. A lot of times the big conferences have special rates for conference attendees. So be an early bird to those as well to get one of those special rates. Otherwise, the room rates will sell out and you might pay a higher amount. Think about the type of room that you need, if you need an accessible hotel room for any reason, or where you want your hotel room to be. If you prefer to be on a lower floor or a higher floor, a lot of times with traveling with a guide dog, it's if you're in a big hotel that's got 18, 19, 20 floors and they have something immediate they need to get out to in the middle of the night, because this can happen sometimes. Now you have to go down 18 floors on an elevator. So if being on a lower floor is better for you, being near the elevator is better, or even near the stairs if you prefer to go down the stairs. Just think about where you might want your room to be. And then it's really important to confirm the hotel's pet policy. I can't tell you how many times I've traveled to hotels that allow pets. So you want to be prepared to encounter dogs, not guide dogs, but pet dogs in hotels. So it's really important to think about that and just be prepared for those types of encounters that you might have at the hotel. And then also, if hopefully if it's a conference for blindness, like a consumer conference for blind or low vision users, a lot of times they're going to give you all the hotel information ahead of time, including the layout of the hotel, the restaurants, all the things available in the hotel. So you can review all of that information well in advance and know where you're going to be eating, or more importantly, get your coffee first thing in the morning. And just the layout of the hotel. So you can kind of preview it ahead of time and really kind of have some of that kind of under your belt before you arrive. So that's really important to think about. Let's talk traveling to the conference. Plane reservations, again, like everything else, maybe the earlier you make your travel arrangements, the better. You might get better rates. Think about, if you can, direct flights, especially when traveling with a guide dog. A direct flight is going to be a lot easier and make your day a little bit less stressful. But of course, we know that's not always the case, depending on where these conferences are held. You may have to, not have a direct flight, but look at the time you're going to be at the connecting airport and make sure that you have enough time, to get from one plane to the other. And think about also in the the airports, the relieving areas. Nowadays, the airports have gotten much, much better at having dog relief areas within the security areas. So when you are at a hotel, I keep saying that, I'm so sorry, an airport in between, that you are knowing where those areas are if you need to get your dog to relieve before you get on your next flight. And also, when you're on the plane, I would request, this is just my personal preference, but a window seat. Of course, you are allowed to sit anywhere on the plane except for the emergency rows. But a window seat, your dog's going to be up against kind of the wall. They're not going to creep out into the aisle where the potential for their little toes and noses to get bumped by people walking up and down the aisle or the beverage cart. And then also, people don't have to climb over your dog if they need to get up to use the bathroom. So really important about where you're sitting on the plane as well. And also when you're on the plane, this is something I've learned for myself. when you have your dog with you, a lot of times you may not be able to fit your carry-on under the seat in front of you, and everything's going to have to go up. So have a separate little bag within your backpack or whatever you're bringing on board of the things that you're going to need on the plane with you. Your phone, headphones for your dog, those things that you're going to need at your seat, and pull those out before you put your bag in the overhead. And arrive early to the airport as well, and request a meet and assist if you need one to get to your departing gate, and also make sure you're requesting a meet and assist if you need one when you arrive in the city that you're traveling to. And then they can help you get to baggage claim or to whatever transportation that you have located for yourself, whether it's Uber or Lyft, or if you've planned ahead and there's an airport shuttle or a hotel shuttle that will get you to the airport. That meet and assist can help you get where you need to go safely. And like I said, to be prepared to wait sometimes, because the meet and assist, sometimes you have to sit and wait for that assistance. So you can also use some other, wayfinding apps too that are great, like Ira, that can help you through the airport, and some other devices too, that for wayfinding to get yourself to the airport if you're comfortable doing that. All right. I am also going to talk quickly about just thinking about orientation for the hotel ahead of time, just a little bit. Also, just sometimes the exhibit hall or the conference itself is in a convention center, not necessarily at the hotel, or it's connected to the hotel, but you have to walk there. Sometimes I've heard about people having to cross streets to get to another hotel because there's overflow hotels, and some of these conferences are very well attended with lots of people. So, think about those things and how you're going to get from place to place ahead of time with your dog. And do not be afraid to ask for help. That is key. I think these conferences, I'm sure Deb will talk about this too once you're there, but they're very challenging. So just do not hesitate to, put down that harness handle and ask for sighted assistance, or, get out your cane. We always are going to encourage you to carry your cane with you as well to this type of event as well, because the dogs, the new environment for them, they're not going to know where they're going, and so it's up to you to be able to navigate and get to where you need to go safely. So sometimes it's easier to take that pressure off the dog too, and get your cane out and really investigate yourself. And there's a couple smart packing tips. I would recommend you carry a backpack. I'm sure most people do, but rather than, especially ladies, like a shoulder bag. So you have your backpack on, so your hands are free. So when you're navigating with your guide dog, if you're traveling with a guide dog, put items in consistent locations so you can easily locate those items when you need them. I use different textured type pouches and containers in my bag so I can easily find things quickly in my bag, instead of just dropping everything in there all in one big jumble. I definitely make sure things are packed in separate type containers, or bags, if you will. And also, consider a backpack that has a designated spot for a laptop or one of your other devices. So that way, if you're going through security, you're easily able to access them. And I would also just, test the backpack, make sure you're comfortable wearing it. Because when you're at a conference and convention, you're going to be wearing it all day, traveling around from, session to session through the exhibit hall. You're going to be out and about all day. And then just make sure to just think about all the things that you're going to need on your trip, medications, comfortable clothing, comfortable walking shoes, any electronic devices that you need for taking notes or navigating. Of course, bring your white cane. If you need any type of devices, if you're able to see a little bit and you want to bring some markers or anything to write things down, make sure you just have all of those things where you can take notes. Consider maybe even a note-taking or a recording device if you want to record sessions. Let's see. I'm just going through my notes. And sorry, I'm using JAWS and going through my. Oh yeah, and the other thing too, which I think is good, if you're going to be at a conference and convention, if you have business cards or something with your name and phone number on it, and you're networking or talking to people, a way to easily hand somebody that if it's in Braille or large print. But nowadays, I know everybody uses their phone, so have that at a ready to pass to somebody. Um, and then you're going to be meeting a lot of people in a lot of different in venues and just if that's something new to you where you're going to be encountering a lot of new people and introducing yourself, just maybe a little elevator pitch about yourself, who you are, is always sometimes good. And I'm kind of having my professional hat on too because I do a lot of networking at these types of conferences as well, meeting a lot of new people and sharing about guide dogs and who I am and what I do. So that's nice to do as well. And okay, we're going to quickly shift over to the dog. All right. So especially if those of you who have not traveled to a large conference before or have been in this type of environment with your dog, I really think about your dog and the type of dog that you have. And it is going to be a very stressful environment for them, regardless if they've been before or not. It can be very stressful. It's not a bad idea to maybe go to, if the dog's a little bit older, maybe have your dog have a little wellness check before you go. Just make sure they're just kind of in tip-top shape before you head out on this type of adventure with your guide dog. Make sure they're up to date on all their vaccinations, if you will, and make sure that the tags that they're wearing are up to date with your contact information. I know all of our GDB dogs are chipped, but just make sure that their tags are up to date as well. And I would also, you have to too, when you're traveling, do a Department of Transportation form for your dog for the plane flights. So every airline does it a little bit differently. Some airlines, it will just be in their system and you don't have to carry paperwork. Other airlines require you to hand over the DOT form upon arrival at check-in. So just make sure you have that with you and accessible and easy to get to for your dog. And if you're comfortable, carrying health certificates, we know that, you don't have to present those normally, but if you're comfortable carrying those with you and have those just in case somebody does ask you for them, you have them. Okay, let's think about, every day, right? Our dogs need to eat. So make sure you pack an ample supply of dog food. Some conferences are great. I know the ACB conference, they send out a lot of information ahead of time, and you can actually order your dog food ahead of time and have it already be at the hotel when you arrive. I know that they have a list of different vendors and different brands of dog food. So just you want to make sure that they have the type of food that your dog is eating. It's probably best not to change up your dog's food right before you travel. We don't want to have any accidents, but just make sure if you do that ahead of time, do it well in advance so you don't arrive there and they don't have your dog food. And definitely, I always pack extra dog food and put it in my carry-on just in case I get separated from my luggage. I will have a meal or two on backup just in case. Make sure you pack all their medications. Of course, their leash, their harness. I highly recommend you pack the gentle leader for your dog. These again are going to be high stress, high just activity environments, especially with other dogs, and being able to have that really good control over your dog, especially their head, when you're working in these types of environments, and then that avoids having to do any, harder leash corrections if you need to, which we don't want to see. But of course, you have those food rewards with you, and even pack some high value rewards as well. Something that is gonna, I don't pack cheese. Cheese probably won't be good to pack. I always use cheese. Something that is, not their normal, but a dog treat that is going to last, on the plane and in your luggage. They're going to need that motivation. And be prepared to reward them more frequently than you do regularly at home, because like I said, they're going to need that motivation because it is a stressful environment. Of course, don't forget those poop bags. A lot of these conferences do already have set up dog relief areas, and we'll have bags available, but we need to be our own responsible dog owners and bring lots of poop bags. If you want to, pack a comfortable bed or blanket for your dog. It's great for the plane. It's great for the hotel room. Also in any sessions you're going to, and I know for me, a lot of times the exhibit halls have hard floors. They're not carpeted, and my dog is a little spoiled and does not like the hard floor. So she is not happy unless she's got something soft and squishy to lay on. You might want to bring their grooming supplies too. It's nice to keep them looking fresh and sharp while you're at the conference. And pack some familiar toys for them. This will help, landing in an unfamiliar place in a hotel room a little more comfortable for them. And play with them when you get back to the hotel room. They're going to need to unwind and de-stress as well. And also, I know some conferences will have some designated kind of ballroom set aside for dogs to run around and play in. I would just be cautious of that. I would make sure that if you do go into that type of environment, there are sighted folks in there. I know at ACB and NFB, both, we will have folks from guide dogs. We will have either instructors or field managers there. So if you want to bring your dog into one of those areas and let them really run around and play, and there might be other dogs in there, consider finding one of us and having us go in there with you, just to have sighted folks in there looking and making sure everything's okay with your dog and the other dogs that are in there, because it's going to be new dogs, and we just want everybody to play safely and nicely with one another. And it's not always bad to bring a little first aid kit for your dog, whatever that looks like. Maybe some, ointment if they get a little scratch or cut, or if you want to, if they have trouble with their ears, bring their ear wash, those types of things with you. And then I don't know if anybody has this opportunity, but if you're not used to this type of busy environment, maybe consider ahead of time going to a couple places where it's more crowded, and just exposing your dog more before you attend. And these are just all suggestions. This is, everybody's gonna, do this in their own way, but they just, the more exposure they have to the types of environments they're going to be in, the less, I think intimidating it can be for the dog. Just a lot of healing with your dog, especially with their harness on and using your cane. I would advise that you would probably be doing this quite a bit at a conference, especially if you've got extremely limited vision. Getting your cane out is going to be extremely, extremely important, and a little bit of a stress relief for your dog, because I can guarantee you you're going to get disoriented at times. The dog's not going to necessarily know where to go because you may not know where you're going, and just get that cane out. So make sure you bring that cane and have it with you. And I think some day pack essentials for your guide dog to pack along, because again, you're going to be out and about all day and you're going to have your dog with you. So collapsible travel bowl for water. You might even have a portable water bottle. There's really some great ones out there that just kind of have the bowl built in. You want to have some pre-measured food, because you might be away from your hotel room during the day. So have some food with you so you can feed them when you're out during the day. We already talked about those high value treats. And again, that lightweight rolled up mat or pads, that's one thing you could bring with you. Some places it in the summer, well, not some places, always ACB and NFB have their conferences in very hot places. So if you have a cooling mat that you can bring, if that's something that you think's necessary for your dog, maybe a small compact towel so you can wipe their paws off, paw wipes for cleaning, something to pack for them. And don't forget their essential medications. If your dog's on any medications, to pack those. Bring a recent photo of your dog on your phone, just to be as prepared as possible. You hear all kinds of stories that happen, so we want to make sure you have all that identification for them. Your booties, bring booties that we've given you. If there's going to be hot pavement, could be even the winter when it's cold. So just, have those with you. And reflective gear if you're going to be traveling, outside when it's getting dark, you want to make sure you have that on your dog as well. And I'm sure I could go on and on about this because there's so much, but I am going to pass it on.
Great.
She's
Oh,
going to talk
lots
about
of good advice.
while we're
Yeah.
at the conference.
So you've actually touched on a lot of the things that are
Sorry.
at the conference, but that's good. No, that's good
Okay.
because we have a time constraints. So I'm glad we got it covered. I do want to mention just a few things that I think are really important. One of them is to think about this from the dog's perspective. The dog is what, 2 feet off the ground if you have a tall dog, and my dog is less than that. And they're looking at this conference. And when you're at a conference that isn't mostly blind people or people with disabilities, it's probably relatively easy for them. There's the orientation for you, but really, most people are kind of going where they're supposed to go, and you can just follow someone where you're supposed to go. And I don't know, I've always found that pretty easy. But when I go to the blindness conferences, it's a lot harder because everybody is disoriented, and people will suddenly change direction right in midstream. And I think from the dog's perspective, it looks really medieval with all those sticks moving around down there, right about at their head level. And sometimes people are a little insensitive and all of that. So it is really, really important to keep a very, as Jane has pointed out, to keep a very steady pace and tone and upbeat with your dog because they might be in shock the first few times they do this. After a while, they are fine and usually and get over this and do it and go, oh yeah, we're doing that again. But basically, for the most part, when they first see all this coming at them, it's kind of alarming. I think the other thing is to really make sure that you are paying very, very close attention to what your dog is doing all of the time, because sometimes your dog it will feel like your dog is doing exactly what you want and going where you want, but then it's actually really following another dog or a person, or it finally saw a guide dog instructor from any school and it says, there's someone who knows what they're doing. And so the whole atmosphere kind of changes for the dog. I just wanted to mention a couple of travel things as you're leaving to go. I live in a place where there is never a direct flight to anywhere. You just can't fly there from here. And so my flights are always long. My typical travel to almost any city is 10 to 12 hours of travel time with 1 or 2 layovers, some of them very, very short and some of them not so short. So I'm not always able to use the relieving areas at the airport with my dog. And actually, she doesn't like them too well. But if she did like them better, it still wouldn't help us too much because we can't really use them because of the time constraint that we'll have. So I definitely adjust her feeding before we travel. And so the day before, she doesn't get as much to eat because I don't want her to starve. She won't. She's big enough. But I definitely don't want her to feel too much stress. And then, other than a few high value treats, I don't feed her while we're on the trip or on the actual travel. I usually arrive where I'm going really, really late at night. That's one of the characteristics of the way my travel has to work. And so I try, as Jane pointed out, to plan in advance, knowing where I'm going to be taking her out before we ever get there so that I can either ask for very good directions or maybe just know, because I know that by this time she is really ready to do that. And so, I want to be able to honor that before we take some sleeping. Um, in general, though, my dogs have always been really, really great at finding like open elevators and that kind of thing. And they think that I want to do that. And so they may rush right into the elevator because that's what they expect to do. But be aware that 50 people may be trying to rush into that elevator. And so one of the first things that my dogs and I have done is usually kind of work on holding back a little bit. We don't have to be first. We don't have to pile in. We can wait our turn and we can avoid those little skirmishes that sometimes happen for dogs in front of the elevator because somebody is kind of excited and in a hurry or really trying to do their job and get you in there. And you don't want it to be yours, but you also don't want to get caught in the middle of any of these other things. Finally, the last item that I wanted to really cover is sort of using volunteers if you're at the convention, particularly again, if you're at conventions that have volunteers. If you're at a convention that's not a disability related convention, the whole convention is your volunteer force and they all want to help. Sometimes maybe too much. But at the conventions where we do have volunteers to assist, definitely take advantage of that whenever it's needed, because there's no point in you and your dog wandering around confused and lost. And your dog knows when you're lost and feels that frustration as well. But one of the things that I try to do, if I understand the routes that I kind of want to go, I actually have the volunteer take me in the way that I'd like to get there if I were doing it on my own, because that way I can reinforce for myself the distances and I can also reinforce for my dog the distances. And so I think that makes a huge difference when we're traveling, to make sure that we get as much consistency about that as possible. I just want to mention, relieve your dog more often on the trip than you would at home, because your dog is a little bit more stressed and is drinking different water, even if they're not eating different food. And boy, I cannot emphasize enough the comment that Jane made about not feeding your dog different food on the trip. In one of my very early dogs, remember I've had six, in the very early dog, I went to a conference and my dog was a very flexible eater. We had changed food a couple of times for different reasons, and he had always adapted to those changes really well. And we went to the conference, and my friend was going to order dog food and got enough dog food for quote all of us. And so we decided that he would eat that dog food, and I had some dog food to mix into it, like you're supposed to do. But you know what? It didn't work, and he got sick. And no one was the worse for wear. He survived and lived 10 more happy years. But the point was that it was a lot more miserable conference for me. I had to have a room service deliver oatmeal to my room and different things to appease him. And speaking of that, people do different things with their dogs while they are at the conference to give them a break. And I want to caution about some of it. Definitely, Jane's suggestion about taking your dog on leash and healing your dog, and using your cane or using a volunteer or going sighted guide with whomever, is certainly a way, and is a good way to do this, because your dog is still with you, but is not really working and is getting a better chance to have a break. If you have a travel crate that you are taking for your dog, and you leave the dog in the room, you could leave the dog in the crate. But I'm a little cautious about that, because cleaning people will come into your room and they're not going to let the dog out or anything, but you don't want the dog to startle them, and you don't want the dog to be startled. So there's that. But definitely do not, please do not go off and just leave your dog in the room or tied to something in your room, because that's a time when the dog might feel stressed and chew through its leash and then be loose. And then those hotel people come in, or your roommate comes in, or something happens and maintenance comes in, or whatever, and the dog is now on the loose. And I have seen loose dogs racing down the hall with great joy, and everyone else in consternation over this. So, I think it's better. I really do. My experience is that it's better to take the dog with you and then just not work it for a while to give it a break. But maybe not to leave it in the room alone, because That is kind of a challenge. One thing I have done also to give my dog a break, and you have to research this carefully, but occasionally there are high school students who are at the conference who are there with family members who have a lot of guide dog experience. And if one of those is there, sometimes they offer a service for fee to take your dog at some odd times for a walk outside the grounds and a break away from all the other dogs and just to take a walk and relieve and be out of that. And if that person has those skills and experience and you trust them and you can work that arrangement out, I've had that a couple of different summers and my dogs have really, really enjoyed it. And again, you want to be very, very careful in choosing, but it is also a possibility. The last thing I want to mention before I turn over to Mark for some thoughts and then we'll go to questions is that I know that one of the temptations at the conference is to get into packs and build a train and go all together in a big line behind somebody's dog. And we just all really want to encourage you not to do that. Your dog is not trained for that and isn't accustomed to that, and it isn't workable. And even if you occasionally do that somewhere else with your dog, this is a tougher environment for your dog. So again, I really recommend if you're going to train up, so you can all stay together to sit together or do whatever it is you're going to do there at the conference, to do that just as a group in sighted guide or with a sighted volunteer or just using your canes or whatever, or using your cell phone to call each other when you finally get to the place you're trying to all be together and not try to be all attached because that long line of people walking side to side in the hall is a havoc for everyone, but it's especially havoc for your dog, whether it's your dog that's doing this or whether it's your dog that's encountering this. So I just really we talked about this, and I agree that we want to be very sensitive to the dog's work environment. This is a weird place for them to work, and they can have fun and enjoy this a lot. My dogs have all ended up liking it fine, but it is very, very difficult when you're first working through. So before we go to Q&A, Mark, I know you probably have some things we've missed or not thought of or that you've observed that you want to add to this.
Sure. So just to check, there are two people who've asked questions right at the beginning.
Yeah, you can. Uh-huh.
I can read
Yeah,
those now, Deb, or
anytime you want. Uh-huh.
all right, because they are relating to what we're
Yes.
talking about. So
Okay.
the first very patient person here at 4:06 p.m. Thank you. Is if our guide hasn't been to a lot of conventions or hotels, can an older dog adapt? Or at 9 years old, would it be
Hmm.
too stressful? So with that one, it's very important to think about your individual dog and how it's doing. And that
Hmm.
is it showing signs at that age, just in its general life, behavior at home? Have you had to reduce the activity level of your guide dog in the field with working with one of our field managers, for example, or an instructor? So telltale signs as to how a dog of any age, but particularly an older dog, is reacting right now to the environment. If it was that you've already had to scale things back and your dog's not as tolerant as it once was, well, then probably not a
Yeah.
good idea to expose your dog to the hustle bustle of a conference or convention. But if your dog's doing fine and you've had a routine follow-up with an instructor, even better to confirm that your dog's doing fine and it's healthy, the vet check's been done and all that stuff that I think Jane mentioned,
Hmm.
then in terms of taking your dog with you, I think it's fine as long as the precautions that have already been talked about are taken. And that is, you may need to monitor, or not may, you will need to monitor your dog's behavior at the conference really carefully. Any dog, regardless of age, could start to show signs of stress. You know your dog best, you're going to know that. So, therefore, maybe breaks are in order. Maybe using the cane more often is necessary. Maybe going human guide to take the load off the dog becomes more necessary. And those options are all fine. It
Hmm.
shouldn't be perceived as, oh my goodness, my dog isn't working well because I have to use my cane. or I've got to go human guide because my dog is not able to cope. I mean, those are things that they're all good options at a convention, regardless of a dog's age. So I would say at 9, it's just like, can your dog basically cope with that sort of an environment? And you make a judgment call, and then you basically do what you need to do at the venue to make your dog as comfortable as possible. If things start to go horribly wrong, then what all has been mentioned, most of these conventions, the major ones, have guide dog representatives there from GDB, and you could ask as to, I'm concerned, my dog is doing XYZ, what should I do? So you can get help at the venue. So that would be my answer to that one.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
second one was, hi, Mark, Jane, and Deb. Thank you for doing this. I've not flown yet with my guide, but will be
Mm.
coming to the alumni reunion in October. I hear people say they ask for bulkhead, though I'm not sure Alaska has bulkhead on the regional jets. Other than window seat, do you have any other recommendations for flying? And do you call the airline in advance or just book your own seat? Thank you.
Mm. Well, I actually never sit in the bulkhead. I hate to sit in the bulkhead. And so just me personally, I mean, everybody's different about things. I never do. So I do agree a lot with, I agree with the idea Jane suggested about trying to sit in the window, if you can, just because people aren't climbing over you as much. It's a little bit easier, and your dog can get up against that wall. And I think that's really, really handy. The other thing I actually do, I've just because I fly so much, and I have frequent flyer miles to apply to this, I actually fly in the class. I don't fly first class because I don't think you get anything for it, just personally. But I do fly in that other class. Delta calls it Comfort Plus. Different ones call it different things. But it's the one where you're not in first class, but you get a little more room for your legs and a room for your dog. And they don't have to be bulkheads. And if you sit in one of those seats, if you're willing to pay that little bit extra to get one, people can actually walk in front of you even if you don't get the window seat. So I don't tell the airlines anything at all about my dog, except that I do have to fill out that TSA form in whatever form my airline wants it. And so I have to apply that to my reservation. And in my reservation, all airlines have the ability for you to ask for assistance. We talked about the meet and assist or different things you might wish to do. And so they all have the ability to identify yourself as a blind or low vision person. But beyond that, I don't tell them in advance because they don't do anything any different. So I just get there and we just fly. And if you haven't flown before, the other thing about that is that going through security with your dog. And so, different people, I'm not sure what the school's recommending right now. Mark can comment to that, but you do have to take your dog through the security. And so you either need to go through individually and get checked or work out how you're going to get your dog through. But you do have to do that. So other than that, though, there's really nothing terribly unique about flying. And airlines are very accommodating.
Jane, I'm not sure if you were trying to say something, but
Hmm?
there you go. You were muted. Go ahead.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I was just, I fly Alaska all the time and yeah,
mhm.
and they really don't have bulkhead seating, but they do have extra leg room. And, the dogs are incredibly, um, it's amazing how stealthy they are and what small spaces they can get
Yeah,
in,
they can
even
fit.
even
Yeah.
when they're large. If you don't sit in the bulkhead, and that's totally fine. I mean, really, the bulkhead I sit in is usually southwest up front, and there is a bulkhead there. But like I said, you're really going to want to put your bag up. If the reason you don't want to sit in bulkhead is because you don't want to be away from your bag, you're going to be better off putting it up so your dog can get itself kind of under the seat in front of you, at least part of its body under the seat in front of you. Um, and and if you can get extra, there's some flights like Alaska does have some seats with extra leg room, and I have flown in those, and I'm questionable about the extra leg room. It's still pretty tight.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, they all are.
yeah, But the dogs they're comfortable. They're okay laying down under there. And sometimes,
Mhm.
I always take the harness handle off. And sometimes I've even taken the whole harness off, especially on a
Yeah.
longer flight. It's more comfortable for them. And but yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to add
Mhm,
about
mhm.
Alaska. And you can, you can get your seat ahead of time, and Alaska has an accessibility hotline. Um, if I can find it, I don't know if we have access to chat, or we can have it sent out, but there is an accessibility hotline and you can call them directly and they can help you find your seat. They might be able to help you book your flight, but they're more there to help you navigate some of the accessibility
Yeah.
parts. So they're
Delta
great.
also has
Yeah.
an accessibility line like that, and they will even book your flight.
Awesome. Yeah, that
Mhm,
it's great.
mhm,
Okay, another question is in here, very good one. You talked about stress relief for the dog and using your cane and healing your dog to give them a break from time to time.
mhm,
Hmm.
Would you only do this when the dog is wearing their harness? My dog greatly dislikes walking with the harness on when not guiding. I'm thinking they must be wearing the harness, but thought I'd ask. So that's a good question. I'll start this
Hmm.
one off because it was just raised actually that Jane sometimes takes the handle off her harness. That
mhm,
is one thing that you can do if it's the case that the dog's okay with the harness body on, but hates the handle banging on its back, when it's walking. You can take the handle off. The other part, though, which it's legally, I need to tell folks, it's not
Hmm.
required for a service dog to have any form of identification. That is, to be given legal access, the guide dog doesn't have to have the harness on, believe it or not. I still prefer that the harness is on because it represents the fact that it's a working guide dog and it helps people understand that. But just to answer that question, if it was that there was a really great dislike by the dog, even just wearing the
mhm,
harness body and healing while you use the cane, there is that option. But I would warn, however, that sometimes the dog's behavior changes, of course, when it isn't
mhm,
wearing anything. So it wouldn't be a good idea to have your dog without any harness on at all if it then reverts to kind of not acting in your best interests as it's walking along just on leash and collar. So, hopefully, with that in mind, even just the harness body and no handle, that would still be appropriate, representing the dog as a guide. And obviously, you're not using the leash to get any guiding information. Um, other than that, I think that's as
mhm.
much as I could say with that question, I think.
And gentle
Um,
leader.
Gentle leader
I'm
too?
just gonna keep saying, bring your
Yeah,
gentle
I
leader.
just can't I just can't tell you how much the gentle leader helps all
It
this.
does.
I'm
Um,
not a big gentle leader person most of the rest of the time because my dog doesn't need it most of the rest of the time. But it makes a huge difference at the conference type environment, especially during that first few days. But I think it's fine to do it the whole time.
Another question. Thank you for the valuable information. Any tips for handling dog stress, particularly at the end of a conference? What about aftercare when you get home?
My dogs have never been stressed by the time we got home. They were so glad to be here. But I think
Yeah,
it would just be the same. You've broken their routine, right? And so it seems like it would just be the same things you would do for any other stress.
yeah, and I think I know Pilaf, my current guide, she's 9, she's a little older, and she's always been that dog that these types of environments really tire her out. So I really go a day or two without
Yeah, with
requiring anything from her.
mhm.
Other than just play, and we may just go for a fun walk, with my cane or, with my husband, and just letting her heal and be a dog, but not requiring any hard work from her, and just let her kind of recover, if you will, just like I need to recover as I'm getting older from these trips as well.
Yeah, they do sometimes have challenges adapting, just like we do, to the time zone changes, and I hadn't thought about that. But that is part of it. So it's like when they eat. So sometimes when they come back, I actually start a compromise eating schedule, feeding schedule that isn't quite back to our normal. Because for me, a lot of conferences are 2 or 3 hours difference in time zone. So again, if you're only traveling an hour in time zone or not changing time zone at all, that's a less stress. But for me, my dog is often, and remember that my dog also had all that disruption while we traveled of maybe eating less because of the great length of my trips. So when I come back, I sort of keep that modified schedule, maybe for a day or two more, if the dog looks like it would sort of benefit from that. And you can tell because they're not like asking for their food at quite the right time or whatever. And so which for her is all the time, but really, the right time. And so I think some modifications on the back end. I hadn't thought about it, but I think there can be some. Mhm.
So, with the time we have left, they're the
Mhm.
questions we have so far. But I was going to just
Mhm.
add some
Mhm.
tips and tricks to the
Mhm.
discussion here.
Mhm.
So back to sort of the first section of preparing for the conference. Um, a lot of the time at conferences, some of the action actually occurs outside the conference venue, and they can be fun in terms of maybe
Mhm.
you get sick and tired of eating at the hotel restaurant, and you might want to go out with a group and venture to a local restaurant or cafe nearby the venue. So that's sort of a different preparation aspect. To do that, you can use technology at home if you
Mhm.
are savvy on the computer or have someone to assist you. You can get an idea of what's around the conference venue. So, for example, restaurants that might be around that you might like to visit when you're there, that kind of preparation, just general knowledge stuff. And then in terms of orientation, just an understanding of the routes to get to those places. It's obviously a consideration as to are you going to want to attempt to do those routes on your own when you get there at the conference, or are you going to go out with a group or with a partner? So, obviously, that would be part of the preparation work. And speaking of that, I think one thing that hasn't been said, and there's a financial consideration to this, I understand, if it's an option to arrive a day early, that can be a good thing. It,
Yes.
in that you can actually get there where it's a quieter time, not as many dogs and canes around, of course,
Mhm.
as was said by Deb, and you can actually do some of this settling in, orientation to the hotel, even to the conference rooms. Like if they're going to be different presentation rooms, you can get to know those with no one in them. Visit them with your dog. Give some food
Mhm.
reward if you actually are in the room, and make it a nice destination for your dog. And other things that also can be really beneficial are introducing your dog to relieving areas that might be around the venue. One of the things that I think all guide dog handlers and guide dog instructors notice is that if you've got a lot of dogs at these conventions, then the relieving areas, unfortunately, can get a little bit smelly and not conducive to some dogs wanting to relieve themselves there, because not all our colleagues and friends necessarily do the right thing and pick up after their dogs, or sometimes they might miss a few things. So, even with that, just the
Mhm.
multiple use of these areas can be tricky. I've seen some conferences, and I might even add cruise ships to this one. Have sort of sawdust in boxes. It's supposed to be a
Mhm.
relieving area for multitudes of guide dogs, which gets soiled very, very quickly, and no dog is going to want to do its business in something that really is pretty awful. So by knowing what's around the conference venue in advance, I'm talking could be parks, could be grass parkways, could be suitable relieving locations. You might be able to actually go there in advance, get your dog comfortable with relieving without all those other things I mentioned,
Mhm.
and set up a good relieving routine. So that's another advantage to going early if you can. Other things that you can do is over here in San Francisco at the Lighthouse, they have a wonderful department, the Mad Lab, and they can produce tactile maps of various things, including the conference areas. So it's incredible. You could order a tactile map if you like in advance to actually understand what's around the conference venue itself. And talking intersections, for example, and the layout of the streets and all that sort of stuff. So that would be the Mad Lab at San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Um, Other things that already been mentioned that I'll just sort of double up on here is that Thinking of it from the dog's point of view, as Deb said, is very important. When the dog first gets to these venues, they have no navigational responsibility whatsoever. They have not been there before. So, therefore, it's really important to understand that you need to do your part as the handler initially to have a navigational responsibility. So, that could mean exploring with your cane, making those mistakes as you learn the area without the dog with you. If you're with someone, they can mind the dog in the room, great. If they can go have a cup of coffee with the dog while you do that, great. If you have to leave the dog alone, well, as has been talked about, there are ways to do that, maybe a transportable crate, something like that for a short period, if the dog is okay with being left on its own. You certainly wouldn't want to try that if you haven't done that for 5 years. That's not going to go
Right.
well. So only if your dog is conditioned at home to spending, some time by itself. If you need help with doing that, getting the dog used to it, you can definitely call our support center for assistance with how to condition your dog to being left for longer periods. But what that does is allows you the opportunity to become familiar with the area. You can do things like visiting, as I said, the conference rooms, understanding areas such as the cafes, restaurants, elevators, escalators, stairs, that sort of stuff. Uh, Having some landmarks established, so you have some general orientation to the area. Um, and it's only fair that then, if you ask your dog to go forward when you get your dog and you start to
Mm.
practice, that you have an understanding, and it may not be perfect, but at least some understanding of what's around and where to go. And you can then kind of work it out together. It won't take long when you start to introduce food and clicker for your dog finding an escalator or finding a stair or the elevator. As we all know, it doesn't take long for your dog to really understand those destinations and really love working there for you. But we want to avoid people with an unrealistic expectation coming into these things, that not only very stressful environment with lots of people around, but expecting a dog to have navigational responsibility right from the get-go. It's unrealistic and unfair, if you ask me, that we put that load onto our dog. But the good thing is, as Deb said, depending on your dog's experience level and its temperament, they are great at perhaps locating things they haven't been to before in that venue that they can generalize, like the escalator, like a staircase rail, a stair rail. So it really depends on your experience and your dog, what it can do when it first gets there. But my advice is to do as much as you can to prepare. And the better you can do that, you're going to have a better experience as a team in the stressful environment of the conference in the days ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. And I guess the other thing that I just really want to mention too, that especially going that day early if you can, if you're going to be there for a long conference, it's really really helpful. And the other thing I've done, and I know that most people can't do this or won't do this, but I just want to throw it out there because it made a huge difference on two different major conferences where I have had major responsibilities and need to not be stressed out by my orientation at the conference and worried about it all day and wondering if I'll show up on time. I've actually pre-arranged, and it hasn't cost a great deal of money. I did pay something, but it wasn't a lot, to actually have an O&M person from some center near where my conference would be to come in that day before and go with me around the building for an hour, and just having someone actually walk you through it, and getting that layout, and not really working your dog through it or even necessarily traveling by yourself with your cane through it, but just going through it has made a huge difference for me. And so it was worth the little bit of money that it has cost to do that, and I've done it twice in thousands of conferences. But I just want to throw it out there as one of those things that if you really are, either have a lot on you, as in terms of responsibility, or are just incredibly stressed about it, this is something that can happen and can be worked out. So That's great. I think we're out of our time. So I want to thank both Mark and Jane for their fabulous thoughts about this. I want to encourage all of you to take advantage of the suggestions that we've made, and I'm sure you have other things. And there are some articles in the recent alumni news on this topic, so you can read those as well. And I hope that we see you all at various conferences this summer with your dogs or with your canes or just you. And thank you all for coming today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And I'm stuck again.
All right, Deb, I think we did it.
Yes, we did. And I'm stuck again. So I'm trying to get us out of here. But my PC is not liking Zoom today at all. Yes, thank you so much. Great presentation.
No worries. You too. Have a
Yeah.
great evening.
Yeah,
See you
thank
soon,
you.
Lee.
Yeah,
Bye.
yeah. Let me out.